So, this is really sad, guys. So, within the concentration camp, within the apartheid of the open air prison that was the Gaza Strip before they were all internally relocated and planned to be sent to Egypt for the economy. Um, I believe that Israel and the Western world has been keeping an eye on their birth rate, and only now we plan on reducing their numbers due to the youth bulge that's happening. There should be no reason they're prospering, but they are. But prosper in the most cynical sense of just living off the bare minimum of the scraps of your soul. Okay, Hamas grows with young recruits eager to fight Israelis. So, as people are destroyed in their homeland more and more, and there's more stress, more turmoil, less hope, obviously these people join the psychopathic ranks of terrorism. A graduation ceremony was held in downtown Gaza Park Thursday night, complete with proud parents taking videos. But it wasn't a high school event. Despite how young some of the boys are, it was the latest class trained to kill Hamas to kill Israelis. Or trained by Hamas to kill Israelis. Yeah. Almost everyone lost friends or family in the war overseen by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. His re-election has convinced many in Gaza that another war is inevitable. As a result, Hamas-trained camps across Gaza are busy. Hamas won't say how many thousands of men it has, but some here estimate it as many as half of its Gaza teenage boys want in. Mohammed, 18, and his 16-year-old twin brothers, Hussein and Awad, are newly trained. All three say if war were to break out with Israeli tomorrow, they'd be ready to fight, though they've only had a week of training. Awad says his desire to fight comes from what he saw in the last war. Quote, I had friends killed, Awad said. So many savage things done by Israelis. I must share this coming fight. And if these eager boys are killed, it won't end there, as we discovered when we met baby Adnan. His mother Tatrid told us uh, if there is another conflict, she will raise Adnan to attack Israel. The cycle of war will go on. A top Hamas official admitted to U.S. the Israelis' blockage against Gaza has slowed the resupply of everything from basic necessities to arms. That may explain why enthusiasm from new recruits is so high, but their training is so short. Alright, so the youth are being trained by the adults who had their lives taken away, specifically by terrorists, and we will learn of the youth bulge violence, specifically happening in the Middle East. And if you don't know what the youth bulge is, um, for the most part, it's a great amount of children being raised without good family structure and becoming radicalized and hopeless. And this is the perfect experimentation. Like Israel and the West could have known this was going to happen, to use this as the scapegoat, to use their anger, their justifiable anger, to destroy them in the face of colonialism. Okay, the youth bulge violence. Intellectual uh, Gunnar Hoynsson stirred uproar in Europe by arguing demographics explains Islamic violence. So this isn't necessarily a demographics is destiny thing. It's just people lost and destitute. Again, this is not to justify terrorism. This is why this is a specific theme on why Israel and the West don't mind if they genocide Gaza. Just simply that. Okay, young Islamist gunmen from Hamas and other nationalist Fatah counterparts have until recently been killing each other in the streets of Gaza and the West Bank. Granted, there are political and cultural explanations for such violent behavior, but the role of demographics, specifically the vast number of young men in the Palestinian Authority, must also be factored into if one wants a better understanding of events in the Arab-Israel conflict. Political scientist Samuel Huntington, author of The Clash of Civilization, has argued that this huge reservoir of young men aged 15 and 30 provides a natural pool of instability and violence directed both internally within Muslim society and externally. When 15 to 24-year-olds make up 20% or more of the population, a society shows a youth bulge. In the words of Gary Fuller, a director of population studies at the University of Hawaii. But it is Gunnar Hoyson who lately made waves in Europe with his book H. und Watchmatch. Terror, I'm Sting. Okay. Sons and World Power and the Rise of Fall of Nations, which focused on the youth bulge phenomenon. Basically, he says, the young men are violent because no society can provide satisfaction for such large numbers of them, even if there were enough ordinary jobs, even if the quality of life were improved. They're not violent because they're frustrated or because they have too much spare time or no prospects, nor are they violent because of their cultural milieu. A society with an overflow of young men simply can't reward such a large number of sons with enough respectability, goes to theory. And so I think this is unfortunately leaving out the turmoil that they are facing while this pattern is happening. So I don't think it has anything to do with the amount of sons necessarily. So I don't disagree with the theory necessarily, but I don't think that's all the full reason. So they find ways to earn a standing. They wage war to earn military heroism, again, in the face of airstrikes and general oppression in the concentration camp that they are in, again, before they turned into internal refugees. Or they simply use an ideology that turns even death into an achievement, into martyrdom. When 15 to 29-year-olds make up more than 30% of a society, argues Henson, who's a social scientist at the University of Bremen, violence is practically inevitable. Young men start fighting for prestige and standing positions. Their society simply can't provide a sufficient number. Remember that women in Gaza, where 40% of the population is under the age of 15, have between 6 and 7 children. Okay, so I was just talking about this. Like, they either are desperate to have children or they're forced and raped into having children. Anyways, Huntington's original class of civilization thesis might be reformatted to suggest that the presence of the youth bulge contributes to the willingness of the society to justify violence on the religious and moral grounds, writes Heinsohn. His book has been lauded by the popular German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk as being of a singular importance in understanding current developments. Hoyson sees the young men's claim to fight for God-given superiority of the religion as merely an excuse. This is also what Kazakira Zudebedi of Fatah's Aska Martyr Brigades observed when he told a reporter, quote, "It was always our choice to be fuel for the struggle, but our problem is now that the car burns the youth as fuel, but doesn't move. These kids are willing to be fuel, but many have been burned as waste." Hoyson writes that until 1914, German women would have as many as 10 children. Some of their sons fought it out on the streets of the Weimar Republic in 1933. Had German women continued to have as many babies as women in Gaza do today, Germany would now have a population of 550 million and 80 million men between 15 and 30. Quote, would these young men be 10 times as pacifist as the 7 million young men Germany has today? Huygens challenged the audience of a late-night philosophy talk show on German television. He reckons it is much more likely that they would be throwing bombs in Danzig, Breslau, and Stettin, reclaiming these sites for Germany. Of the 27 biggest youth bulge nations today, 13 are Muslim. A decade from now, Islamic countries will make up a quarter of the world's population. Maybe this is what the late Hamas leader Abdelaziz Rantisi meant when he spoke of the century of Islam. What does that mean for America? Demographically speaking, Washington can hardly afford to be involved in a two-front war, which now it's a seven-front war. Facing a manpower shortage, Hassan predicts that the future America will leave its fortress only if its security is directly threatened. And I say seven front because Israel will always be our responsibility. Okay. The Islamic youth bulge worldwide won't start to shrink until 2015. Against such a demographic threat, America and Canada are the only demographic... What? Why would it do that? Okay, demographic can hardly afford to be involved in a two-front war. The Islamic youth bulge worldwide won't start to shrink in 2014. Against such demographic trends, America and Canada are the only geographic entities even theoretically capable of shielding themselves. The very thought of trying to do so would be an anathema in most of Europe. Hunson contends that by 2030, many of Europe's more savvy non-Muslim youth will have already left for sanctuary in the United States. Sloterdijk, one of Europe's most prominent intellectuals, said of Huygens' arguments, just like Das Kapital was for Marxism, this... What? Why did it... Hold on. Oh. Just like Das Kapital was for Marxism, this book is the key work to a new realism in a field that could be called demographic materialism. What does all this mean for Israel? With only 600,000 boys under 15, Israel is already a demographic David. Demographic David? Okay. Oh, is that a religious meaning? Because David was a... Okay. Worldwide, the Palestinian Goliath has been seeing a 3.3 advantage, and no one knows when the Palestinian youth bulge in PA, as opposed to the rest of the world, will peter out. Okay, so, again, the fears are Arab population growth, and of course there's other factors that play into how we disseminate the reasons to the broader public. But this is a strong reason. So, reading more about the youth bulge phenomenon. As the world decries Israel's attempts to defend itself from the rocket attacks from Gaza, consider this. When Hamas routed Fatah in Gaza in 2017, it cost nearly 350 lives and 1,000 wounded. Fatah's surrender brought only a temporary stop to the type of violence and bloodshed that are commonly seen in lands where at least 30% of the more male population is in the 15 to 29 age bracket. In such youth bulge countries, young men tend to eliminate each other or get killed in aggressive wars until a balance is reached between their ambitions and the number of acceptable positions available in their society. In Arab nations such as Lebanon, 150,000 dead in the civil war between 1975 and 1990, and Algeria, 200,000 dead in Islamist war against their own people in 1999 and in 2006. The slaughter abated only when the fertility rates in those countries fell from 7 children per woman to fewer than 2. The warring stopped because no more warriors were being born. In Gaza, however, there have been no demographic disarmament. The average woman still bears 6 babies. For every 1,000 men aged 4 to 44, there are 4,300 boys aged 0 to 4 years. In the US, the latter figure is 1,000, and in the UK, it's only 670. So, this is from 2009, and we can already tell from the 3 babies per woman that it has definitely declined, but it's still a massive proportion compared to the developed nations, and that's always a worry from these people. And so the killing continues. In 2005, when Israel was still an occupying force, Gaza lost more young men to fight gang fights and crime than its war against the Zionist enemy. Despite the media's obsession with the media's conflict, it has cost many fewer lives than the youth bulge in West Africa, Lebanon, or Algeria. In the 6 decades after Israel's founding, only some 62,000 people, 40,000 Arabs, 22,000 Jews have been killed in all Israel-Arab wars and Palestinian terror attacks. During that same time, some 11 million Muslims have been killed in wars and terror attacks, mostly at the hands of other Muslims. Jeez. What accounts for the media's conflict's relatively low body count? Hamas and their ilk certainly aim to kill as many Israelis as possible. To their indignation, the Israelis are quite good at protecting themselves. On the other hand, Israel, despite all the talk about its disproportionate use of force, is doing its utmost to spare civilian deaths. Even Hamas acknowledges that the most of Palestinians killed by Palestinians are raids from their own ranks. But about 10 to 15 of Gazans' casualties are women and minors, a tragedy impossible to prevent in a density settled area in which nearly half of the people are under 15 and the terrorists hide among them. The reason for Gaza's endless youth bulge is that the large majority of its population does not have to provide for its offspring. Most babies are fed, clothed, vaccinated, and educated by UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and World Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. Unlike the UN High Commission for Refugees, which deal with the rest of the world's refugees and aims to settle them in their respective host countries, UNRWA perpetuates the Palestinian problem by classifying as refugees not only those who originally fled their homes, but also their descendants as well. So they're being propped up by UN forces in subaltern conditions to say that we're not killing them, we're actually helping them. You know, they're alive, look. So, okay. There was something that I wanted to read here, but was it not here? Okay. Oh, this is what I wanted to finally end this on. So, children make up nearly half of Gaza's population, and so we can definitely see that this was inevitable as a target, you know, because they're not official human beings. They're in the concentration camp where America isn't letting up. They're not asking for a ceasefire. Okay, children make up nearly half of Gaza's population. Here's what it means for the war. When Fida al-Raj received the pre-recorded message last week telling her to evacuate her home because the area was about to be bombed, she first thought of her children. To her surprise, they had actually beaten her to the street. The day before, an Israeli airstrike had hit her cousin's house, killing his wife, mother, and children. Those kids were close to al-Raj's children in age. They were friends. Quote, My daughter said to me, "What are you waiting for?" Al-Ajaj recalled. "Yesterday we were crying out for our cousins. Do you want people to cry over our dead bodies today?" So I had to leave. The family left their home in Gaza City and started a long a days-long journey to Rajah in South Gaza, where NPR uh, reached her by phone this week. Al-Araj, 39, is a mother of five, aged 13, 12, 10, 8, and 2. The current war in Gaza isn't their first, and the family is a part of a striking trend. The population is one of the youngest in the world. Nearly half, 47%, are under 18. According to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, on Wednesday, more than 3,470 people have been killed in Gaza since Israel began its bombardment in response to the attack by the military group Hamas on October 7th, or those about 1,200 have been children, according to the Defense of Children International Palestine on Wednesday. Here's why the population skews so young, what it means for this war, and what it means for the future. Who lives in Gaza? The population of the Gaza Strip, is 2.2 million. The narrow slice of land covering 140 square miles, roughly the size of Las Vegas, is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Compared with other areas, Gaza has the youngest population. Two-thirds of the population, Palestinians living in Gaza, are refugees or their descendants from 1948 war, and most of the population is Muslim. There is also a small native Palestinian Christian population. Since 2007, Gaza has been under a strict land and sea blockade by Israel that prevents civilians, along with goods like food, medicine, from easily moving across the border, contributing to harsh economic conditions and high poverty levels. Culturally, education has remained a top priority. More than 70% of the children aged 6 and 12 in Gaza attend school, and most graduate from high school. Additionally, 75% of the students at the Islamic University of Gaza are female. The drive for attaining education is part of a cultural, part pride, and it all goes back to 1948 displacement, says Maha Nassar, an associate professor in the School of Middle Eastern and North African Studies at the University of Arizona. Quote, "So many Palestinians lost their lives and their livelihood," she told NPR, "and so they want their children and then later their grandchildren to be able to do something that they could take with them even if they were displaced again, and so education came to be seen as a mechanism to do that." This is actually the opposite of what demographers would think education would do. So again, they want to live, they want their children to be able to have good lives like they didn't have good lives. And so, I mean, isn't that what most parents would do? Of course, I can see the sarcasm coming. Why have children in a situation like this? In a concentration camp of all things? But I don't think that's the point at all. Why do children make up such a large portion of the population? The reasons are varied. Many Palestinians simply don't get the chance to grow up or grow old, dying in their early adulthood either in conflict or due to the struggling healthcare system, which drags the averages down. The 16-year-old blockade has hampered first access to medical care and caused shortages of essential supplies like gauze and IV bags, says Yara Asi, an assistant professor of global health management and informatics at the University of Central Florida and the author of up-and-coming book How War Kills. Quote, "Preventing care is basically non-existent," she said. "They're constantly dealing with short-term health issues, and those that need chronic care either don't get it or have to leave. And to be able to leave their medical treatment, residents have to apply for a permit that's notoriously difficult to obtain." Another factor for the young population in Gaza is that people tend to marry in their early 20s, according to 2021 data by the Palestinian Center Bureau of Statistics, and the fertility rate, births per woman, is 3.38, according to a U.S. Census Bureau estimate. This is compared to 1.83 in the U.S. Again, they point this out for Islamophobic reasons, but not to the normal public. That's not again, this isn't the type of rhetoric that gets normally disseminated to the public. It would just make them seem more stronger and like independent if they had less babies. That's the propaganda of in some neoliberal rhetoric, unfortunately. I mean, it doesn't make you strong or weak to have or not have a child. Anyways, quote, some research has shown in Palestinian populations and others under the threat that they see having children as a way of resistance in a way, as he said. That's kind of seen as a continuation of the bloodline that's been under threat in various ways for hundreds of years. What does that mean for conflict? For Al-Araj and her 5 children, it means constant vigilance. Even before this conflict began, Al-Araj had a rule. Her kids must always stay within her eyesight. Still, this moment feels different, she says. She knows of families where both parents were killed in Israel airstrikes and only the children survived, or in some cases, only one child survived. Okay, I'm sorry, guys, I have to leave. Wait, hold on. She said she talked with her 2 oldest daughters, Rita and Ilham, aged 13 and 12, about what they should do if their parents are killed. She told them where they keep money and the essential documents and who they should contact. Quote, they were shocked, like, what are you saying? And was like, Kalas, maybe I'm next. I hope I'm next if we are next, not you, she said. I know this is a huge burden to dump on my kids, but this is the reality of a life because, I mean, what are they going to do? Exactly. You cannot lie to your kids, but most of people in the West are so just they have it so easy, and when COVID happened, they just couldn't handle crises. Okay. The number of children also had a practical effect, with some families reported they simply don't have the means to travel with kids and also have nowhere to go. Where can we go as a family of 5 or 6? One man told the BBC. What does it mean for the future? So, because of the population management and having less kids, it'll never be generally accepted to have this type of family structure migrate to a Western place. Um, Again, because this would go against their pride and culture to have more kids in the face of what their parents never had because they were constantly being bombed and destroyed by the concentration camp. Okay. Multiple conflicts, the brigade, the harsh living conditions have had a compounding effect. A 2021 report by the Euromed Human Rights Monitor found 91% of Gazan children suffer from conflict-related trauma. A 2022 report by Save the Children found 80% of children reported emotional distress, up from 55% in 2018. Sorry, I'm trying to be quick about this. I have to go soon. I'm sorry, guys. Assis said that there are still many unknowns, but the outlook is bleak. These children are out of school. These children are completely traumatized, she said. There's no good news here. It's a bad outcome all around. Not just today, but for the future generations who, for those who survive, grow up with the history and this trauma. Still, Nassar from the University of Arizona says something can be done. Some of her cousins are in Gaza and have already lived through several wars. Quote, they know how to laugh, they know how to make jokes, they know how to enjoy life, she said. We cannot fail them by telling them, okay, we're going to put things back to the status quo until the next war. That's not an option. And she believes the children of Gaza deserve the chance to heal. Quote, they still have dreams, they still have hopes, they still have aspirations, she said. And I think that with the right support mechanisms in place, we can help them deal with this sort of this trauma and help them. All right, guys. So the cycle continues, and America will not relent. The terrorism will not relent. And so, uh, honestly, this is too depressing, honestly. I believe this is a youth bulge situation 100%, and we are trying to erase them.